February 28th, 2026, 2:31 a.m. Eastern Time. While most of America slept, the world shifted. In a brief recorded statement, President Donald Trump confirmed that U.S. forces had initiated what he described as major combat operations against Iran. Almost simultaneously, Israel announced it had launched its own coordinated assault under a previously undisclosed codename. Within minutes, verified footage showed explosions across multiple Iranian cities. Smoke rose into dark skies. Sirens echoed across the Gulf. This was not a warning strike. This was a campaign. And financial markets, set to open in just hours, were staring at the edge of panic. The targets were not symbolic. Early confirmations indicated strikes near intelligence compounds in Tehran, military production facilities around Isfahan, and missile infrastructure near Kermanshah. Israeli officials stated their focus was ballistic missile systems. U.S. officials emphasized preemptive suppression of retaliatory capacity. That sequencing matters. When a country strikes missile launchers before anything else, it signals one thing. They expect those missiles to fly. And they did. Within the hour, air defense systems activated in Bahrain. Qatar reported interceptions over its airspace. In the United Arab Emirates, residents captured flashes over Abu Dhabi. U.S. diplomatic facilities across the region ordered immediate shelter-in-place protocols. This was no longer a localized exchange. It was regional ignition. Behind the scenes, the buildup had been visible for days. Non-essential embassy staff were quietly authorized to depart. Naval assets repositioned. Carrier groups adjusted patrol patterns. These are not last-minute reactions. They are chess moves placed carefully on the board. Publicly, diplomacy had appeared alive. Talks in Geneva had recently ended without resolution. Leaders spoke cautiously of ongoing discussions. But military posture told another story. Aircraft carriers do not reposition on rumor. Fleets do not clear port for hypothetical tension. Markets sensed it. Oil prices had been climbing steadily throughout the week. Energy traders were pricing in risk. Insurance premiums on Gulf shipping lanes had spiked. Tanker rates had surged. Investors understand something ordinary citizens often don't. War risk is rarely sudden. It builds in layers. The public sees the explosion. Markets feel the tremor before it. And then came the second shock. Yemen's Houthi forces announced the resumption of attacks on Red Sea shipping in solidarity with Iran. The Red Sea had only recently stabilized after months of disruption in 2025. Global supply chains had just begun to breathe again. Now they were holding their breath. To understand the magnitude of this moment, picture the global economy as a vast circulatory system. Oil is its blood. The Strait of Hormuz, just 21 miles wide at its narrowest point, is one of its main arteries. Roughly 1/5 of the world's daily oil supply flows through that passage. 20%. Imagine if 1/5 of the blood in your body suddenly had to pass through a battlefield. Energy markets do not respond calmly to that image. Gold prices surged in overnight trading. Currency markets began shifting toward perceived safe havens. Asian markets prepared for volatility not seen since the early days of the Ukraine conflict. But beyond the charts and graphs lies psychology. When investors wake up to missile footage instead of earnings reports, fear spreads faster than fire. Pension funds, retirement accounts, mortgage rates, gas prices, everything connects. The modern economy is not built for prolonged uncertainty. And this is where the tension deepens. Because the first hour revealed something far more significant than the explosions themselves. Iran's retaliation was fast, too fast to be improvised. Missiles were reportedly launched within roughly 45 minutes of the initial strike confirmation. That is not reaction time. That is pre-authorization. That is preparation. This was not a government scrambling in confusion. This was a government that had already rehearsed the script. And if retaliation is pre-scripted, escalation may be too. But what happens next will change everything. When two militaries strike simultaneously, the real battle is not just physical, it's psychological. The first wave is about shock. The second wave is about endurance. Iran's initial response targeted regional U.S. assets, intercepted missiles over Qatar, air raid alerts in Bahrain. Drones reportedly tracked across Gulf airspace. Whether damage was limited or not, almost, didn't matter. The message was clear. Retaliation would not be symbolic. It would be persistent. History offers uncomfortable parallels. In 1988, during the final phase of the Iran-Iraq War, oil tankers became targets in what became known as the tanker war. Insurance costs exploded. Global oil markets convulsed. Even limited naval skirmishes sent price shocks worldwide. Today's energy markets are larger, faster, more interconnected, which means they are also more fragile. Energy analysts had already modeled scenarios where even partial disruption in Hormuz could push crude prices above 100 per barrel. That threshold is not just a number on a screen. It affects airline tickets, grocery bills, manufacturing costs, inflation rates. For families living paycheck to paycheck, A $20 spike in oil translates to higher transportation costs within weeks. For central banks fighting inflation, it means policy nightmares. Meanwhile, Israel activated nationwide shelter protocols. Hezbollah in Lebanon remained silent but watchful. Iraqi militias issued statements condemning the strikes. The web of alliances and proxies across the region created a powder keg effect. When multiple actors possess independent trigger fingers, escalation becomes less predictable. Political rhetoric added fuel. President Trump framed the operation as necessary to dismantle missile capabilities and prevent long-term threats. Israeli leadership emphasized deterrence. Iranian officials vowed there would be no red lines in response. That phrase matters. In geopolitical language, no red lines signals removal of restraint. Psychologically, it tells adversaries escalation boundaries are blurred. Markets despise blurred boundaries. Airlines began rerouting flights around Middle Eastern corridors. Shipping firms assessed alternate paths around Africa's Cape of Good Hope. Each reroute adds time, fuel, cost, and cost compounds. Imagine a factory in Germany awaiting components from Asia. If shipping lanes delay by 2 weeks, production halts, workers idle, revenue slips. Multiply that across continents. War in one region ripples globally within days. And then there is the nuclear dimension. Military analysts speculated whether subsequent strike phases might target hardened underground facilities. Bunker-busting capabilities, strategic air deployments, and satellite surveillance all entered public discussion. Each headline adds tension. Each rumor fuels volatility. Investors began asking the same question diplomats ask in crises. Is this limited, or is this transformational? Limited wars have ceilings. Transformational wars rewrite maps. The most unsettling element was speed. The time between strike confirmation and retaliation suggested command structures had anticipated this scenario. That implies contingency plans layered deep within both governments. When both sides believe they prepared for escalation, confidence can become dangerous. Confidence reduces hesitation, and hesitation is often the thin line preventing catastrophe. Meanwhile, citizens across the Gulf region spent the night in shelters. Sirens have a psychological effect. Unlike any other sound, they compress time, they heighten awareness, they create a shared sense of vulnerability. Financial traders thousands of miles away may never hear those sirens, but they feel their echo, because markets trade on perception. And perception right now is uncertainty. And this is where the video takes a shocking turn. By sunrise in Asia, financial terminals glowed red, oil futures spiked, gold climbed, stock index futures dipped sharply. Investors moved capital like passengers rushing for lifeboats on a tilting ship. But the true risk isn't just the first market reaction, it's duration. If conflict lasts days, volatility rises. If it stretches into weeks, structural damage begins. Consider this. Roughly 20% of global oil flows through the Strait of Hormuz. That choke point is not just geography. It is economic leverage. Even the threat of disruption can trigger speculative buying. Speculation drives prices higher than physical shortages alone. Higher prices strain emerging markets that rely heavily on energy imports. Currency devaluation risk increases. Sovereign debt stress intensifies. We've seen echoes of this before. In 1973, an oil embargo triggered stagflation across Western economies. Growth slowed while prices soared. The shock reshaped global monetary policy for a generation. Today's global debt levels are far higher. That makes economies less resilient to energy shocks. Meanwhile, households everywhere feel conflict differently than policymakers. They don't debate missile strategy. They see higher gas prices. They see groceries costing more. They feel uncertainty in job markets. War's financial tremors hit ordinary people quietly but persistently. And beneath it all lies the strategic question. Is the objective limited to deterrence, or is it broader political transformation? Statements from leadership on both sides hinted at ambitions beyond immediate military targets. When rhetoric includes systemic change, conflicts rarely remain contained. Psychology again plays a role. Leaders who frame operations in existential terms narrow their exit options. Retreat becomes politically costly. Escalation becomes easier than compromise. That dynamic increases the probability of prolonged instability. Shipping insurance firms recalculated risk premiums overnight. Energy companies reviewed contingency storage plans. Central banks prepared emergency liquidity measures. This is how modern war unfolds, not just with explosions, but with spreadsheets, with algorithms, with capital flows measured in trillions. And here's the sobering truth. Financial systems are built on confidence. If investors believe escalation will spiral, they act accordingly. Confidence drains, liquidity tightens, credit markets wobble. In extreme cases, that spiral feeds itself. As of this moment, the conflict remains in its early phase. Military operations continue. Diplomatic channels are reportedly active behind closed doors. But history shows that the first 72 hours often determine whether wars remain regional or expand outward. And that uncertainty is what keeps markets awake. Because once global supply chains fracture, rebuilding trust takes years. The missiles may stop, but the economic aftershocks linger. We are witnessing a pivotal moment, not just in geopolitics, but in the stability of a system that touches every paycheck, every savings account, every retirement plan. This is not about distant battlefields alone. It is about interconnected vulnerability. The world is watching. Markets are reacting. And the next decisions made in Washington, Tehran, and Jerusalem could define the next decade. If you want clear, calm analysis as this story unfolds, beyond headlines and beyond panic, stay with Economic Tales. Because understanding the forces behind events like this isn't just informative, it's essential. And the next part might completely change how you see this topic.